In April 2025, a terrorist attack in Kashmir killed 26 civilians. India blamed Pakistan-backed militants and launched Operation Sindoor on May 7th. Missile and drone strikes hit Pakistan-administered Kashmir. Pakistan responded with artillery fire and retaliatory drone attacks. It was the worst escalation between the two nuclear powers in decades. Most people today live their lives without realizing just how chaotic the world really is. There's no World War I or II this time, no global draft, no trenches stretching across Europe. But don't be fooled. Right now, as you watch this, entire cities are being bombed. In Ukraine, missile strikes continue to devastate towns, and soldiers battle in the trenches as if it's the 1940s all over again. But Ukraine is just one of many.
Overnight, in the capital of Ukraine, the sound of missile strikes and air sirens.
Yemenis run for cover as Israeli airstrikes rain down on the capital Sana'a.
Tonight, the Gaza Strip reeling from more deadly Israeli strikes.
With breaking news, India launching a military operation targeting what it calls terrorist infrastructure inside Pakistan and Pakistan-administered Kashmir.
From Sudan to Yemen, from Gaza to the Caucasus, from the Sahel to Kashmir, wars rage on. Some make headlines, others remain in the shadows. Countries are being invaded, armies are clashing, millions are caught in the crossfire. Yet if it's not viral on social media, most people barely even notice. Today, we're diving into every major war happening right now. Who's fighting, why, and what's at stake. Some of these conflicts are shaking the world. Others, you might be hearing about them for the first time. So, welcome to Grandline Media. Since I already mentioned it, let's start with the war everyone knows about, Ukraine versus Russia. In 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. What started as a special military operation quickly turned into the largest war in Europe since World War II. Cities were bombed, millions fled, and Ukraine, despite being the underdog, fought back harder than anyone expected. Western countries sent weapons, sanctions hit Russia, and yet the war dragged on. As of 2025, Russia still holds large portions of eastern and southern Ukraine. But Ukraine has pushed back hard, recapturing key areas like Kherson and parts of Kharkiv. In return, Russia is stepping up its drone and missile attacks, targeting deep inside Ukrainian cities and energy infrastructure. And civilians, they're still stuck in the middle, paying the highest price. What's next? Well, either peace talks or more war. And if NATO gets directly involved, well, let's hope we don't have to make a World War III documentary next. Because to tell you frankly, the war between Russia and Ukraine is not a simple dispute. The root of war is deeper than you think. So why are they fighting, by the way? Well, like I said, it was so deep that it needs a separate documentary to explain the war between Russia and Ukraine. But to make it short, the Russia-Ukraine war began due to Russia's desire to maintain control over Ukraine, fearing its move towards NATO and Western alignment, while Ukraine fights for its sovereignty and independence. But then again, that one sentence is not enough to describe the whole picture of the story. Perhaps we will make a video about it soon. By the way, let's move on with another war that you are probably aware of because it is not yet done. And it is the Israel-Palestine War. Now this one is controversial, and I will try my best to stay neutral on explaining this one because like the Russian and Ukraine conflicts, this one was also deeply rooted. And it is like a coin that has two sides that both need to consider. Anyway, this conflict goes way back, literally decades, a very, very long time ago already. But in October 2023, Hamas launched a massive attack on Israel, and Israel retaliated with full military force. The war escalated quickly. By early 2025, more than 35,000 Palestinians and over 1,200 Israelis have been killed. Entire neighborhoods in Gaza have been flattened, hospitals are overwhelmed, and food is running out. Both sides refuse to back down. While the international community is divided, some call for Israel's restraint, others for Hamas to disarm. But the truth, it's the civilians who are caught in the fire. The world is split. Some support Israel, others stand with Palestine. But one thing is clear, innocent people are suffering the most. What's next? As of May 2025, negotiations are ongoing between Israel, Hamas, Egypt, and the United States for a long-term ceasefire. But airstrikes and rocket attacks still happen, and Gaza remains devastated. Peace isn't here yet, just a temporary pause in a cycle of destruction. Now the Sudan Civil War. Sudan right now is dealing with a brutal civil war that most people aren't even aware of. So, what exactly is happening here right now? Well, in 2023, Sudan erupted into conflict between two rival military factions, the Sudanese army, led by General al-Burhan, and the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, commanded by General Hamedi. What started as a power struggle between former allies escalated into all-out war, with intense fighting in Khartoum and Darfur. By 2025, over 13,000 people have been killed and more than 8 million forced to flee. Cities are in ruins, families are torn apart, and Sudan now faces one of the worst humanitarian disasters on the planet. Despite calls for a ceasefire, the conflict continues, leaving Sudan's future uncertain. So, in short, two military factions, the Sudanese Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces, are fighting for power, and millions of civilians are caught in the chaos. There's mass displacement, humanitarian crises, and nobody really knows when it will end. Sudanese people are desperate for peace, but as usual, the ones with the guns aren't listening. Let's move with the other one that, like the Sudan Civil War, you probably don't know about, the Myanmar Civil War. Myanmar has been in turmoil since 2021 when the military overthrew the civilian government. Since then, the country has been a battleground between military forces and pro-democracy resistance groups. The result? Thousands died, villages burned, and a nation falling apart. The military is trying to keep control, but rebel forces aren't backing down. Here is the brief explanation. In Myanmar, since 2021, a military junta has been in control after overthrowing the democratically elected government of Aung San Suu Kyi. The coup sparked widespread protests and civil disobedience, which were met with brutal crackdowns. Ethnic armed groups and resistance forces, including the People's Defense Force, or the PDF, have been fighting against the military, leading to intense clashes, especially in rural regions. The situation remains tense, and in 2025, it's only gotten worse. Resistance forces have captured territory and launched coordinated offensives, while the military junta strikes back with air raids and brutal crackdowns. Over 2.7 million people have been displaced. Villages are burning and international aid struggles to get through. Still, the fighting rages on. And just like in Sudan, the rest of the world barely notices. Next one had already ended, but since the violence still continues, I decided to add it here. It is the Ethiopian Conflict, or Tigray War. Ethiopia's Tigray War officially ended in 2022, but violence still hasn't stopped. The Ethiopian government and Tigray rebels signed a peace deal. But guess what? Fighting is still happening in different regions. Ethnic violence, massacres, and instability continue. So, is Ethiopia at peace? Not really. It's just a war on low volume. But what happened? Well, the Ethiopian conflict, which erupted in 2020, centers around the Tigray region. The Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, clashed with the Ethiopian federal government, leading to a full-scale war. The conflict escalated into a humanitarian crisis, with thousands killed and millions displaced due to airstrikes, ground fighting, and blockades. Though a peace agreement was signed in November 2022, sporadic violence continues in some regions, affecting civilian populations. This conflict has drawn in regional powers and raised concerns over stability in the Horn of Africa. Yemen's civil war rarely makes global headlines anymore, but it's still one of the most devastating conflicts in the world. Since 2014, the war between Houthi rebels and the internationally recognized government, backed by a Saudi-led coalition, has turned Yemen into a humanitarian catastrophe. A UN ceasefire in 2022 offered brief hope, but by 2023, fighting resumed. In 2025, drone and missile attacks from the Houthis continue, met by Saudi airstrikes in return. Civilian casualties remain high, famine is widespread, and healthcare systems have collapsed. Millions of Yemenis are displaced, living in refugee camps or war zones. And with the world focused elsewhere, Yemen's suffering continues, mostly in silence. In Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, jihadist groups linked to ISIS and Al-Qaeda are waging war against local governments. Military coups since 2021 have eroded civilian authority, and by 2025, the Sahel is in chaos. Entire towns are emptied, terrorist attacks are frequent, and regional armies are stretched thin. Mass displacement and food insecurity are growing, but the world barely notices. The Sahel conflict might be one of the most underreported wars in the world today, and one of the deadliest. In April 2025, a terrorist attack in Kashmir killed 26 civilians. India blamed Pakistan-backed militants and launched Operation Sindoor on May 7th. Missile and drone strikes hit Pakistan-administered Kashmir. Pakistan responded with artillery fire and retaliatory drone attacks. It was the worst escalation between the two nuclear powers in decades. A U.S.-brokered ceasefire paused the violence on May 10th, but tensions remain high and peace is fragile. Civilians on both sides live under constant fear. The Haiti crisis. Haiti isn't technically in a war, but it might as well be. Hopefully it won't happen, but what's going on in Haiti right now is total chaos. Armed gangs have taken over large parts of the country, and the government barely has control anymore. Kidnappings, murders, and crime are skyrocketing, and Haitians are fleeing by the thousands. With no clear leadership and no military solution in sight, Haiti is basically in a state of war, just without the official declaration. So, in short, Haiti is currently facing a violent crisis fueled by gang control, political collapse, and economic devastation. By 2025, the capital, Port-au-Prince, is practically run by armed gangs. The government has lost control, and international forces, led by Kenya, are preparing to step in. But for Haitians caught in the chaos, help can't come soon enough. Last one is the Nagorno-Karabakh Conflict. In September 2023, Azerbaijan launched a final military offensive that took full control of Nagorno-Karabakh. The result? Over 120,000 ethnic Armenians fled the region almost overnight. After decades of conflict, the Armenian population of the area is now virtually gone, and what was once a frozen conflict has ended with a forced exodus. The Nagorno-Karabakh conflict is a territorial dispute between Armenia and Azerbaijan over the region of Nagorno-Karabakh, a landlocked area located within Azerbaijan's internationally recognized borders, but populated mainly by ethnic Armenians. The conflict began in the 1980s and escalated into a full-scale war in the 1990s after the Soviet Union collapsed. Despite a ceasefire in 1994, tensions remained high, with occasional flare-ups of violence. In 2020, the conflict reignited, leading to a 6-week war, which ended with a ceasefire agreement brokered by Russia. However, the region's status remains unresolved, and periodic clashes continue to occur. The conflict has caused thousands of deaths and displaced many people, with both sides accusing each other of violations and war crimes. So now, is the world at war? Looking at this, it's clear. The world is not at peace. Some wars dominate the news, others go unnoticed. And not even wars, there are a lot of tensions between countries that are happening right now in the world that I did not mention in this video. But whether it's in Europe, Africa, Asia, or Latin America, people are fighting, people are dying, and entire countries are being reshaped. Will these wars end soon? Some, maybe, others, not in our lifetime. But one thing is certain, you don't need a world war to have a world at war.